The morning sun peeked through the worn curtains of May's small apartment as she got ready for another day of teaching at Pinewood Elementary. She hummed softly while picking out her clothes. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue blouse and dark pants she bought on sale 3 years ago. Her life had always been about making do with what she had, a lesson learned from her grandfather who had raised her after her parents passed away. May glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m. She had plenty of time to prepare breakfast before heading to school. The kindergarten kids would be waiting for her, with their bright eyes and endless questions. Teaching 5-year-olds wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it filled her heart with joy every single day. As she cracked eggs into a pan, her phone rang. It was Mr. Patterson, her grandfather's lawyer. "Good morning, May. I hope I'm not disturbing you." His voice sounded unusually solemn. "Not at all, Mr. Patterson. Is everything okay with Grandpa Lee's affairs?" she asked, turning down the stove. "That's why I'm calling. There's something important we need to discuss. Could you come by my office after your school day? Say around 4:30? May felt a flutter of worry. It had been 3 weeks since her grandfather's funeral. She thought all his affairs had been settled. "Of course I'll be there," she promised. The day passed in a blur of alphabet songs, finger paintings, and tying shoelaces. May loved her students, but today her mind kept drifting to Mr. Patterson's call. What could be so important that it couldn't be discussed over the phone? At 4:25, she parked her old Honda, with over 200,000 miles on it, outside the small law office. The car made a concerning noise as she turned off the engine, but car repairs would have to wait until her next paycheck. Mr. Patterson welcomed her with a warm handshake and ushered her into his cluttered office. "Please, have a seat, May." He pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," he began, adjusting his glasses. "For 40 years, he worked as a janitor at Oak Ridge National Bank. Everyone there knew him as the quiet man who kept the floors spotless and the trash bins empty." May nodded. Her grandfather had never missed a day of work in 4 decades. He would leave home before dawn and return after dark, his hands rough from cleaning chemicals but his spirit unbroken. "What people didn't know," Mr. Patterson continued, "was that your grandfather was listening and learning all those years. While he mopped the floors during board meetings, he absorbed every word about investments, market trends, and banking strategies." He opened the folder and pushed several official-looking documents toward May. "Your grandfather started buying shares in the bank with his first paycheck. Just a tiny amount at first, but he never stopped. He lived simply, invested wisely, and—" Mr. Patterson paused for effect. "Over 40 years, he quietly became the majority shareholder of Oak Ridge National Bank." May's hand flew to her mouth. "That's impossible. Grandpa Lee lived in our tiny apartment. He wore the same winter coat for 20 years. He packed leftovers for lunch. That's who he was, humble to his core. But make no mistake, he was also brilliant." Mr. Patterson tapped the documents. "He now owns, correction, you now own 51% of Oak Ridge National Bank. He left everything to you." May stared at the papers, her hands trembling as she picked them up. Stock certificates, bank statements, legal documents, all confirming what seemed impossible. Her grandfather, the man who taught her to save pennies and mend clothes, had secretly amassed a fortune worth millions. "Why would he keep this from me?" she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "He wanted to protect you," Mr. Patterson explained gently. "And I think he wanted you to have a normal life, not defined by wealth. But now it's all yours. The controlling interest in one of the largest banks in the region." May looked at her hands. A teacher's hands with chalk dust under the nails, not a banker's manicured fingers. What would she do with a bank? How would the bank executives react when they learned their majority owner was a kindergarten teacher who couldn't afford to fix her car? "There's something else," Mr. Patterson added, handing her an envelope. "He left this for you." With shaking fingers, May opened it to find a handwritten letter in her grandfather's careful script. "My dearest granddaughter," it began. "If you're reading this, I have finally rested. Don't mourn me too long. Instead, take what I've built in silence and give it a voice. They never saw me, even when I was right in front of them. Make them see you." 2 days after meeting with Mr. Patterson, May stood outside the Oak Ridge National Bank headquarters, clutching her grandfather's documents in a worn leather portfolio. The building towered above her, all glass and steel, nothing like the elementary school where she taught. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her best dress, a simple navy blue one she wore to parent-teacher conferences, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, with security guards in crisp uniforms and employees hurrying about in expensive suits. May approached the reception desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled hair barely looked up from her computer. "I need to speak with someone about ownership documentation," May said softly. "It's regarding majority shareholdings." The receptionist glanced at May's modest dress and scuffed shoes, her expression shifting from boredom to mild amusement. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "Investment inquiries are handled on the third floor, but you'll need an appointment. Our financial advisors are very busy." Her tone suggested May might be better off at a smaller, less prestigious bank. "This isn't an investment inquiry," May explained, her voice a bit stronger now. "I'm here about my grandfather's shares. He owned 51% of this bank, and I've inherited his position." This got the receptionist's attention. She looked at May directly for the first time, eyebrows raised in disbelief. After a brief, uncomfortable silence, she reached for her phone. "One moment, please." 15 minutes later, May sat in a waiting area outside the executive boardroom on the top floor. Her heartbeat quickened as the massive doors opened and a middle-aged man in an expensive suit appeared. "I'm Wilson Hayes, bank president," he said without offering his hand. "I understand you have some questions about ownership." "Not questions," May replied, rising to her feet. "Documentation." Inside the boardroom, 12 people in business attire sat around a gleaming table. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed impatience. May recognized some of them from photos in the business section of the local newspaper. "This is Ms. Lee," Hayes announced. "She believes she has inherited ownership of our bank from her grandfather, who worked here as a janitor." There was a moment of silence before someone chuckled, then another, until a ripple of laughter circled the table. A woman with steel gray hair tapped her pen against her notepad. "Which janitor?" "Old Lie, who retired last year." "Yes," May said, her cheeks burning. "My grandfather cleaned this building for 40 years." "I remember him," another executive said. "Nice old man. Always had candy in his pockets for the secretaries." This triggered more laughter. Hayes smiled thinly. "Let's see these documents, then." With trembling hands, May spread out the certificates, legal papers, and transaction records that Mr. Patterson had given her. The board members leaned forward, their amusement fading slightly as they examined the paperwork. Hayes picked up one of the stock certificates, examined it, then passed it to the woman beside him, who squinted at it through her glasses. "These look authentic, but there must be some misunderstanding," Hayes said smoothly. "It's simply not possible that a janitor accumulated controlling interest in this institution without anyone noticing." "My grandfather was very private about his investments," May explained. "He saved every penny and—" "Do you have any idea what 51% of this bank is worth?" interrupted a red-faced man at the far end of the table. "Millions. Tens of millions. You're asking us to believe a man who moped floors could afford this." "He bought shares slowly, over decades," May said, "starting when the bank was much smaller. He listened during board meetings while he cleaned. He learned." This triggered the loudest laugh yet. "He listened during board meetings?" Hayes repeated incredulously. "And what became a financial genius while emptying trash cans?" The woman with steel gray hair smiled coldly. "Let me guess. You've fallen on hard times as a— What do you do for a living?" "I teach kindergarten," May answered quietly. "A kindergarten teacher," someone exclaimed, as if this confirmed their suspicions. "And now you've discovered you're actually the owner of a bank. How convenient." Hayes gathered the papers and slid them back across the table. "I'm sure you believe these are legitimate, but we'll need our legal team to verify them. Which, frankly, I doubt they will. This sort of thing, people claiming unexpected ownership, it happens more often than you'd think." The security guard appeared at the door, summoned by a discreet gesture from Hayes. "Jenkins will show you out," Hayes said, already turning his attention to the others. We'll be in touch if there's anything to your claim, which between us seems highly unlikely. As she was escorted to the elevator, Mai could still hear their laughter echoing from the boardroom. Mai walked out of the Oak Ridge National Bank with her head down, tears threatening to spill onto her cheeks. The security guard had escorted her all the way to the sidewalk, as if worried she might try to sneak back in. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys. All she wanted was to get away from the towering building where people had laughed at her grandfather's memory. The drive home was a blur. Honking horns barely registered as her mind replayed the boardroom scene over and over. The laughter, the dismissive glances, the way they spoke about her grandfather as if he had been nothing more than the dirt he swept away each night. Mai pulled into the driveway of her small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a modest two-bedroom with peeling paint and a tiny garden, but it was home. As she stepped out of her car, she noticed her husband's sleek black car already parked in the garage. That was unusual. Jin rarely came home before 7. "Jin," she called out as she entered through the kitchen door. "Are you okay?" She found him in the living room, laptop open on the coffee table, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up and quickly ended his call when he saw her red-rimmed eyes. "What happened?" he asked, immediately crossing the room to her. "You're home early, and you've been crying." Mai collapsed into his arms, finally letting the tears flow freely. Between sobs, she told him everything about her grandfather's secret shares, her meeting with Mr. Patterson, and the humiliating encounter at the bank. "They laughed at me, Jin. They said Grandpa Lay couldn't possibly own anything in that bank, that he was just a janitor who handed out candy." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Maybe they're right. Maybe these papers are some kind of mistake. Jin guided her to the couch and poured her a glass of water from the side table. His expression had changed from concern to something harder, more focused. "Those papers aren't a mistake," he said quietly. "Your grandfather was one of the smartest men I ever met." Jin rarely spoke about his work. May knew he ran some kind of technology company, but whenever she asked questions, he would smile and say it was boring computer stuff and change the subject. What May didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Jin's boring computer stuff had made him one of the richest men in the country. He had built his company from nothing, working out of a garage 10 years ago. Now it was worth billions, but he had purposely stayed out of the spotlight, avoiding magazine covers and television interviews. "Let me see the documents," he said. May handed him the leather portfolio. He studied each page carefully, occasionally nodding. "These are real, May, every single one of them." He looked up at her. "Your grandfather really did own 51% of that bank. And now you do." "But they won't accept it," she said miserably. "They think I'm making it all up." Jin closed the portfolio and set it aside. Then he took both her hands in his. "Did I ever tell you why I fell in love with you?" he asked suddenly. Mai blinked, confused by the change of subject. "Because I didn't know who you were when we met. Because I taught you how to cook dumplings." He smiled. "Because you saw value in things others overlooked. You saw beauty in the broken pottery you collect. You saw potential in the troubled kids in your class. You saw me when I was just another tech nerd with big dreams." Jin's face grew serious again. "Those people at the bank, they've spent their whole lives judging books by their covers. They didn't see your grandfather's brilliance because they couldn't look past his mop and bucket. And now they can't see past your teacher's salary and second-hand clothes." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at their small garden where Mi's grandfather had taught them both how to grow vegetables. "I've always kept a low profile with my company. You know that. I wanted success without the spotlight." He turned back to face her. "But I think it's time to step out of the shadows." "What do you mean?" May asked. Jin picked up his phone. "I mean those bank executives are about to learn that the kindergarten teacher they laughed out of their boardroom is married to the founder of Phoenix Tech." His fingers flew over the phone screen. "I'm calling my lawyers. All of them. By tomorrow morning, they'll have verified every single one of these documents." And then he smiled, but there was steel behind it. "We're going back to that bank. Together." The next morning, May woke to the sound of voices downstairs. It was barely 6 a.m., but her living room had been transformed into a makeshift office. 3 men and 2 women in expensive suits sat around her dining table, which was now covered with laptops, legal pads, and coffee cups. Jin stood in the center, pointing at documents spread across the coffee table. "Morning," he said when he spotted her on the stairs. "Hope we didn't wake you. These are my lawyers." One of the women, with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Vivian from Blackwell Legal. We've been reviewing your grandfather's documentation all night," she smiled. Your grandfather was quite the financial genius. May felt suddenly self-conscious in her old cotton pajamas. "I'll go change." "No need," Jin interrupted. "They're almost done. We've confirmed everything." A tall man with glasses looked up from his laptop. "The ownership trail is crystal clear. Your grandfather began purchasing shares in 1982, starting with just 10 shares at $3.50 each. Over 40 years, he made 1,764 separate purchases. Never enough at once to trigger reporting requirements. By the time he retired, he owned 51.3% of Oak Ridge National Bank. But how did no one notice? May asked, accepting a cup of tea Jin handed her. He used 3 different investment firms and 7 different brokers, explained another lawyer. And remember, when he started buying, this was before digital records. Paper trails were easier to keep separate back then. Vivian tapped a thick folder. Plus, your grandfather was clever about timing. He bought most aggressively during market downturns when the bank's shares fell. During the 2008 financial crisis, he picked up nearly 8% of the bank in just 6 months. May sat down, trying to absorb it all. The bank executives didn't believe me. They laughed and said a janitor couldn't possibly. Her voice trailed off. "That's about to change," Jin said. His usual gentle expression had hardened into something May rarely saw, the face of a businessman who had built an empire from nothing. "We're going back today, but first, we prepare." For the next 3 hours, me and Jin worked with the legal team. They explained banking regulations to her, outlined her rights as majority shareholder, and rehearsed what she should say. By mid-morning, 2 more specialists had arrived. A financial analyst and a public relations expert who usually worked with Jin's company. "You don't need to memorize everything," Jin assured her when he saw her overwhelmed expression. "Just understand the basics. These people," he gestured to the team, "will handle the details." "But I'm just a kindergarten teacher," May protested. "What do I know about running a bank?" The PR specialist, a kind-faced woman named Lin, patted her hand. "You don't need to run daily operations. As majority owner, you set direction and approve major decisions. The existing management handles day-to-day business." And, added Jin with a smile, "You know more than you think." "Who taught you about money?" "Grandpa," May answered automatically. "Exactly. The same man who outsmarted an entire bank's leadership for 40 years. His wisdom is part of you." By noon, everyone began packing up. Vivian handed May a sleek leather briefcase containing the organized documents. "We've tabbed everything and added a summary on top. Just follow the plan we discussed." Jin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and nodded. "The car is here." Outside, May was startled to see not their usual vehicles but a gleaming black limousine. A driver in a dark suit stood beside it. "Is this really necessary?" she whispered to Jin. "Appearances matter in their world," he replied quietly. "Remember how they treated you yesterday when you arrived in your old car, wearing your teaching clothes? Today will be different." Lin guided May into their bedroom, where a garment bag waited on the bed. Inside was a designer suit in deep blue, professional but not flashy. Beside it lay a small jewelry box containing pearl earrings that had belonged to May's grandmother. "Perfect." Lin nodded approvingly once May was dressed. "Professional, confident, but still you." As they walked toward the limousine, Jin squeezed her hand. "Remember, today isn't about revenge. It's about respect for you and for your grandfather's memory." "What if they still don't believe me?" May asked, the doubt creeping back. Jin smiled, and there was that steel again beneath his gentle exterior. "Then they'll have to deal with me. And trust me, no one in the business world wants that." The limousine pulled up to Oak Ridge National Bank at exactly 2 p.m. Heads turned in the busy lobby as May and Jin walked through the revolving doors, followed by their team of lawyers. The same receptionist from yesterday sat at the front desk, but this time her eyes widened in recognition. "Good afternoon," May said calmly. "I have an appointment with Mr. Hayes and the board." I don't see anything on the calendar," the receptionist stammered, suddenly flustered. "Call him," Jin suggested with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tell him Mrs. Chen is here about her grandfather's shares, and that she's brought her husband, Jin Chen, founder of Phoenix Tech." The receptionist's fingers fumbled with the phone. "Mr. Hayes? There's a group here to see you. It's the woman from yesterday, Mrs. Chen. She says she has an appointment." She paused, listening. "Sir, she's with Jin Chen from Phoenix Tech and a team of lawyers." The change in the receptionist's expression told them everything. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Within minutes, they were escorted not to the waiting area like yesterday, but directly to the boardroom. The same executives who had laughed at Mai were already gathered, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. Hayes stood at the head of the table, his confident smile from yesterday replaced by a wary frown. "Mrs. Chen, we weren't expecting you today," Hayes began. "That's strange," Jin replied before Mai could speak. "Given that my wife presented legal documentation of majority ownership yesterday, I would have expected you to clear your schedules." He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Jin Chen, Phoenix Tech, you may have heard of us." The color drained from Hayes' face as the name registered. Phoenix Tech was one of the largest technology companies in the world and one of the most secretive about its founder, who rarely appeared in public. "Of course, Mr. Chen, it's an honor. We just didn't realize the connection," Hayes said, shaking Jin's hand weakly. "Why would you?" Jin replied pleasantly. "After all, my wife doesn't look like what you expect a billionaire's wife to be, does she? Just like her grandfather didn't look like what you'd expect from your majority shareholder." The board members exchanged nervous glances as Mai and Jin took seats at the table. Vivian and the other lawyers arranged themselves behind them, opening briefcases and spreading documents methodically. "Mr. Hayes," Mai said, her voice steady now. "Yesterday, you and your colleagues laughed at me. You mocked my grandfather's memory. You dismissed the documentation I provided without proper review. Mrs. Chen, I apologize if our response seemed dismissive," Hayes said quickly. "We simply needed to verify." "Which you could have done yesterday," Jin interrupted. "Instead, you chose to humiliate my wife and escort her from the building." The woman with steel-gray hair who had been particularly condescending yesterday leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, surely you understand our position. It's not every day someone claims majority ownership of a bank." "Actually, I do understand," Jin replied. "What I don't understand is why you felt laughter was an appropriate response to legal documentation." Vivian stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table. "We've prepared a comprehensive verification package. It includes every transaction your bank's former janitor made over 40 years, building his position to 51.3% ownership." Another lawyer placed a second folder beside it. "And this outlines the regulatory filings we'll submit by end of day, officially recognizing Mrs. Chen as the controlling shareholder of Oak Ridge National Bank." Hayes reached for the folders with a slightly trembling hand. "This seems to be in order, but our legal team will need to." "Your legal team has had their chance," Jin cut in. "The transactions are valid. The shares are real. My wife is now your boss." The red-faced executive who had been dismissive yesterday spoke up. "This is highly irregular. The board would need to vote on." "The board doesn't need to vote on facts," Vivian said firmly. "Mrs. Chen owns 51.3% of this bank. That's not up for debate or approval." May watched as the reality settled over the room. These powerful people who had laughed her out of the building yesterday were now shifting uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Part of her wanted to savor their discomfort, but another part, the part that made her a good teacher, knew that humiliation rarely leads to positive change. "Mr. Hayes," she said, softening her tone slightly, "I'd like to call an official board meeting. Now." Hayes glanced around the table, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Mrs. Chen. The floor is yours." May took a deep breath and looked around the table at the executives who just yesterday had laughed her out of the room. Now their faces showed a mixture of disbelief, worry, and in some cases, barely hidden anger. She glanced at Jin, who gave her a reassuring nod. First, May began, her voice growing stronger with each word. I want to tell you about my grandfather. The man you knew only as Old Lai, the janitor with candy. She pulled a worn photograph from her briefcase and placed it on the table. It showed a smiling elderly man in a janitor's uniform standing in front of the bank. Li Wei came to this country with $5 in his pocket and a 6th-grade education. The only job he could get was cleaning floors. But every night, while you were at home with your families, he was here, watching, listening, and learning. Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mrs. Chen, we meant no disrespect. Please let me finish, May said firmly. My grandfather cleaned this building for 40 years. He emptied your trash cans while you discussed investment strategies. He mopped your floors while you planned acquisitions. He polished your windows while you analyzed market trends. She tapped the photograph. You never truly saw him. He was just part of the background to you. But he saw everything and he learned. With his first paycheck from this bank, he bought 10 shares at $3.50 each. Every paycheck after that, he bought more. The woman with steel gray hair studied the photograph with newfound interest. I remember him bringing me tea when I worked late. I never thought to ask about his life. Few people did, May replied. He didn't mind. He always said, being invisible has advantages. While being invisible, he heard about every investment opportunity this bank considered. He knew which ones you pursued and which ones you ignored. Jin opened his laptop and turned it toward the board. A spreadsheet appeared on screen, showing hundreds of small transactions over decades. My grandfather followed your investment strategies, but also pursued opportunities you overlooked. He bought local properties you deemed too small to bother with. He invested in immigrant-owned businesses you rejected for loans. And nearly everything he touched turned profitable. The red-faced executive leaned forward, examining the spreadsheet with growing amazement. These returns are extraordinary. Some of these investments yielded 300% growth. My grandfather understood things about the local community that you couldn't see from these boardroom windows, May explained. He knew which immigrant businesses had strong family support. He recognized which neighborhoods were improving before property values reflected it. Vivian handed out copies of another document. This analysis shows how Mr. Blay systematically acquired shares. During the 1987 market crash, he doubled his position. During the 2008 financial crisis, when your stock dropped 60%, he used his life savings to buy more. One of the younger board members looked up from the document with genuine admiration. He was doing dollar-cost averaging before it was mainstream, and these entry points are perfectly timed. Mee nodded. He never took a business class or earned a degree. He learned from watching all of you. The irony is, if you had ever truly noticed him, talked to him, asked his opinion, you might have benefited from his insights. The room fell silent as the executives absorbed this information. Hayes' expression had changed from dismissive to thoughtful. Mrs. Chen, he said finally, I believe I speak for the entire board when I said we owe you and your grandfather an apology. What he accomplished is nothing short of remarkable. Mee acknowledged his words with a slight nod, but wasn't finished. Yesterday, you laughed at me when I said I was a kindergarten teacher. You thought that disqualified me from understanding business. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. This is my grandfather's journal. For the last 10 years of his life, he taught me everything he knew about banking, investments, and this institution. He was preparing me for this moment. Jin smiled proudly as May opened the journal. My wife may teach 5-year-olds during the day, but she helps manage our family investments every evening. Our portfolio has outperformed the market by 23% over the last 5 years. The executives exchanged glances, their expressions now showing a new respect mixed with uncertainty about their own futures. So, May said, closing the journal, now that we understand each other better, let's discuss the changes I'd like to implement at my bank. 6 months later, May stood in the newly renovated community room of Oak Ridge National Bank. The space, once an unused storage area, now bustled with activity. Today was the grand opening of the bank's Financial Literacy Center, where free classes would be offered to immigrants, students, and anyone wanting to learn about money management. "Are you nervous?" Jin asked, straightening his tie as they watched people filing in. "A little," May admitted. "But Grandpa always said being a bit nervous keeps you sharp." The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of changes. After that fateful board meeting, May hadn't fired the executives as many expected. Instead, she challenged them to see the bank and the community it served through new eyes. Hayes approached them, looking different than he had half a year ago. The arrogant bank president had been replaced by someone more thoughtful, his expensive suit traded for business casual attire that matched the bank's new, more approachable image. "Mrs. Chen, everything's ready for your speech," he said. "We've got a full house, community leaders, small business owners, and 3 news crews." "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," May replied. "How's the microfinance program coming along?" Hayes brightened. "Extraordinarily well. Those small business loans you insisted we offer to immigrant entrepreneurs? We've already seen a 96% repayment rate, better than our traditional corporate loans." This had been one of May's first changes, creating a microfinance division that provided small loans to people who would never have qualified under the old rules. Her grandfather had always believed in the determination of fellow immigrants, and the program was proving him right. "And the internship program for local high school students?" May asked. 20 students started last week, Hayes confirmed, "including that young man you recommended, the one who fixes computers at your school." May nodded, pleased. The boy was brilliant with technology, but from a family that could never afford college. Now he had a path forward. The woman with steel-gray hair, who May now knew as Dr. Patel, approached with a folder. "The final numbers for the quarter," she said, handing it to May. "I think you'll be pleased." May scanned the document and smiled. The bank's profits were up 22% since she had taken control. Turns out, serving the entire community, not just the wealthy parts, was good business. "It's time," Jin whispered, gesturing toward the podium. As May walked to the front of the room, she caught sight of a painting on the wall, her grandfather in his janitor's uniform, standing tall and proud. She had commissioned it as the first decoration for the new community center. "Good morning," she began, looking out at the gathered crowd. "Welcome to your bank." She emphasized the word "your," watching as it registered with the audience. Many of them had never felt welcome in this building before. 6 months ago, I learned something important from my grandfather. He taught me that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. She gestured around the room. "This center is just the beginning. Today, we're announcing 3 new initiatives: a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, a homeownership program for essential workers, and a business incubator for community entrepreneurs." The crowd applauded enthusiastically. In the back, May spotted her kindergarten students and their parents who had come to support their teacher. She still taught every day, refusing to give up the job she loved despite her new responsibilities. "But more important than any program is a fundamental change in how we see each other," May continued. "My grandfather swept these floors for 40 years, invisible to most of the people who worked here. How many others do we pass by each day without really seeing?" The room grew quiet as her words sank in. The security guard who protects your building might have brilliant ideas about improving safety procedures. The cafeteria worker serving your lunch might understand food costs better than your budget analyst. The janitor cleaning your office might be quietly buying shares in your company. Several people chuckled at this, now familiar with her grandfather's story. "So I challenge you, really see the people around you. Learn their names. Ask about their lives. Listen to their ideas. Because brilliance, determination, and wisdom can be found anywhere if we only take the time to look." As Mai finished her speech to resounding applause, she glanced at her grandfather's portrait. His eyes seemed to twinkle with approval. The bank he had quietly purchased 1 share at a time was now becoming what he had always envisioned, a place that served everyone, recognized talent wherever it appeared, and helped ordinary people build extraordinary lives. And his granddaughter, the kindergarten teacher who still drove her old car to school each morning, was making sure his legacy would never be invisible again.